Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Academy Insider Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Stefan Simkovic, another Naval Academy grad, and he's going to be talking today about the Comma Club. If you have no idea what the Comma Club is, well, listen to the episode. I'm excited to talk to you about it. But this is an episode that we're releasing around the 12-week exam, mark in the semester, where some midshipmen out there may be struggling, maybe having a hard time. Again, the Naval Academy academics program is extremely difficult, and there are a lot of midshipmen who struggle, and this is going to be the story of someone who struggled deeply academically during their time at the academy. He graduated in the last, very, very bottom of the class, which may be a hint about what the Comma Club is, and has gone on to live a very successful life and is in the current stages of building out an incredible company and distributing worldwide with some things and bringing on some big investors. And so this is an exciting conversation. I'm really excited to get this out there and just share the story to show you that even though you may be struggling at the academy, even though you may have a deep level of stress and anxiety about the academic portion of being in Annapolis, it's going to be okay. And as long as you continue to grind, continue to fight, and continue to ask for help, you will get there to the end. So I'm excited for you to listen. Thank you so much. Let me know if you have any questions. Otherwise, enjoy the episode. All right, hey, Stefan, thank you so much for taking the time to join us on the Academy Insider Podcast today. Excited for us to share your story and talk a little bit about, one, this idea of the Comma Club, which will come up, but just generally, the difficulties that is the Service Academy academic, like the monster that is Naval Academy academics, and how it's, again, established and prepared you for life. But before we jump into the main discussion, if you don't mind just introducing yourself and providing a little bit of background about where you're from, your upbringing, how you ended up at the Naval Academy, and now currently where you're at now and what you're doing.
For sure. Yeah. Thanks for having me. I'm super stoked to be here. Stefan Simkovic, class of 2009. I was born and raised in New York City. Parents divorced in 93. So my mom raised me in the Upper East Side of Manhattan. Growing up, I went to middle school in Manhattan, and then I was able to go to kind of a boarding school in upstate New York, a prep school. And, when it came time to looking at colleges and everything like that, I kind of wanted something a little bit bigger. It was a small liberal arts boarding school, and a lot of the students matriculated to small liberal arts colleges, kind of like Hamilton, Colby, Tufts, and stayed in the New England area. I would like to say, being from New York City, and I was a sophomore during 9/11, that kind of played a role in giving back, in service to play my part there. And, I went to the Naval Academy. I followed my friend there who was actually getting highly recruited for lacrosse. And I just happened to tag along. And then when I went there and walked and saw the mids and kind of the structure, high level, I was like, I think I can dig this. I think I would like this a lot. And then, so I, caught wind of Naps. I'm a Napster, 2005, and I heard nothing good things about Napsters and, the camaraderie we have there. And, my little Navy text thread, all 15 of us are Napsters. So, not thinking too far ahead, if I ever had a kid, I would push them going to Naps, even if they could get directly in.
That's the 5-year program, baby. Come on now.
no one, when you're 39 years old, no one's going to ask where you lost a year or anything like that. I'm kind of all about preparation and friendship. So I did fall into the category of a low SAT score, but pretty good GPA and active in the high school. I even was adamant on my Annapolis application that prefers Naps, will go to Naps. I did look at some Naval Academy Foundation schools, some of those prep schools in New England to do a PG or under the foundation, but luckily I got into Naps. I reported to Naps in July of 2004. Yep. And then I got through Naps, and then we'll get into the academy stuff. And I graduated in May of 2009. I was a SWO for 5 years, took the untraditional route when I got out. I became a lifeguard for the city of San Diego. Also during that time, I was a ski bum in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. I've been a barista twice in my life. And then kind of leading up to what I'm doing now, I was in a hospitality software company called Cloudbeds. I started off at an entry-level sales position. My back was kind of against the wall, applying to jobs, and I needed a job at that time. And then I got laid off from that position or that company in February 2023. And then 6 months later, I started the LLC for my company that I'm currently doing now. The DBA, doing business as, is Rissant Straps. The LLC name, as we'll get into it, is the Comma Club, because that's what I graduated in. And now I'm kind of an entrepreneur that created an experience-based solution of a fast release utility strap that was originally, the idea sparked when I was a lifeguard.
Mhm.
And now we're making a lot of headway with that strap being nationwide, and then recently in New Zealand now, and then also working with a lot of kind of big companies, including Granger and Polaris, looking to implement my product into their accessory line. So I guess, long story short, I know your audience is a lot of parents. And, there are parents that will have mids from now until the end of time, where mids are struggling academically, and they're questioning their self-worth, and they even think beyond, like, am I just going to be this maybe average person because I feel like I'm average and below average at Annapolis. But things can change for you overnight with an idea or at a job, and then before you know it, you're talking to the companies I'm talking to are multi-billion-dollar companies that I'm working with. And being back at Annapolis with like a 2.01 GPA and not finding out that I was going to graduate until the week prior. I'll never forget logging into that system. I forget what it was called.
Mids, baby. Logging into mid.
To heart was dropping. I was at an off-campus house, and it said 2 point something, and I said,
Mhm.
I'm out.
I'm good.
I'm like,
Peace. I'm out.
I love
uh,
it. Mhm.
yeah. No. And we'll kind of jump right into it. At what point in the Naval Academy experience, like, did you have a moment like first semester plebe year where you were like, oh crap, this is gonna be rough for me, right? What was your experience early on with the Naval Academy academic side of things?
I think the one that comes to mind is plebe chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
Even though I took chemistry at NAPS, and a lot of the courses you take at NAPS are redundant and you repeat plebe year, I think the first time I thought I was kind of in trouble or just it was going to be challenging is when we took the plebe exams summer. The
Mm-hmm.
exams are in the summer, and some plebes can like validate and then all of a sudden like go to sophomore year classes, even junior year classes. So I remember going into plebe year, and a lot of plebes in my company were very smart, and they ought to, the Chem 2 out of the way, Chem 1 out of the way. And already the comparing is when you compare, you rob the gift of joy. I feel like that's one of the quotes. And I remember chemistry. I had a big class. Usually the classes at Annapolis are small and intimate and get to know, but it was like 23 of us in there or more. I remember us all being elbow to elbow, and my teacher spoke okay English. She was good. I forgot her name. She was very nice, very sweet, but she was definitely not from the United States, and she was a good teacher. And yeah, during that time, it moved so fast, and chemistry was tough. And then when I failed that class, I think I was in trouble a little bit. Well, I knew this was going to be a resisted,
Yeah.
challenging path, and taking Chem 1 again during second semester, and and I just felt like everyone, maybe I didn't notice, or just everyone around me, I felt like they were just waiting to graduation. And then
Mm-hmm.
there was like people like me, and people like me that were fighting to graduation, and we just like did not know the next day. And
Did that lead to any like either confidence issues or like make you nervous in the classroom? Like, how was like your overall demeanor? Like, were you just stressed out the whole time, like thinking like I'm on my last leg here and I may not make it?
yeah, I thought there was times, I did go to ACT boards throughout my 4 years. There was one ACT board during my senior year where it was recommended that I delayed grad. But I had a professor, my advisor, Dr. Good. She was in the history department. She was very, very kind and adamant about getting her advisees out the door at the right time. And I'll never forget, she finagled my schedule so I could graduate on time. There was a lot of credits in there. There was like 20 credits, but she was able to get me out there. So yeah, the failing of chemistry started the compounding of anxiety,
Uh-huh.
depression. Am I going to make it? You go on that website that tells you the rankings of teachers and everything like that. I forget what it was called. Like,
Rate my teacher, I think it was for a
rate
little
my
while, right?
teacher. And if your teacher had like a red hot chili pepper, they were good to go. And, and then some teachers you just wanted to avoid completely. And I did get those. So yeah, as you can see, I'm a big extrovert. I think I have a good IQ, but my EQ. So if I got I went into a class and, there was classes like prob and stats, double E, and it just like kind of compounded. So yeah, I did kind of experience anxiety and depression and like and question my self-worth during that time at Annapolis. And I think, each semester there was classes that like I did okay. And, I wasn't like a complete disaster, B's and C's, but then like I owe those big classes, those core classes, the chemistry,
Yeah.
the physics,
The
the
thermos.
WE,
Yeah.
where like if you get an A in that class, it's like worth, like B's
It,
in like three other classes, I believe I
yeah,
remember.
it's just weighted. It's a massive. There's a large. It's a large credit class, right? Like it's usually like a 4 credit class versus a lot of the 2 credit classes you take, right? So if you get an A in it, it heavily weights your Cooper in a positive direction,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
And yeah, so the
Uh,
big classes like that, physics, chemistry, prob and stats, calculus. I guess I just never was like kind of a math person, and I'll never forget this. I remember this was said to me years ago, and some things stick with me. Annapolis gives you too much to do in too little time with too little resources. And I didn't have the mindset of after a forestall lecture, you know going back to my room and studying for a physics exam or stuff like that. For some reason, my mind and my soak time was kind of working against me in that. And it's like, oh man, I want to go to bed too, and everything like that. So yeah, the troublesome classes compounded me, and it did, it did affect my self-worth and my belonging to be here. And on the outside, I am a very confident person and I speak well, but internally I started self-doubting myself. And to be transparent, I'm like, am I dumb? Like, do I belong here? Should I look at other options? Should I look to transfer? And then it only gets worse. The comparing only gets worse along the way, because you get mids are starting to get, like, your classmates are starting to get Rhodes Scholar positions. You have the select few that get to go doctor right out. You have the select few that actually, senior year or second semester, they're not putting on a uniform. They're starting their graduate degrees at like University of Maryland and
mhm.
Hopkins, and like, oh, why can't I be in that realm? But I just kind of realized over time that I think I was smart. I think I
Mhm.
was intelligent. Just my soak time needed to be longer, and my soak time of absorbing material was not in parallel with the Annapolis's speed. So say
Mhm.
we learned something on Monday and the test was like Wednesday, the high caliber mid can pick that up immediately. Whereas I may have needed like the next Monday to kind of do well in that exam, if that makes sense.
No, it makes sense. And so what's interesting again as we talk on Academy Insider and do a little bit of then versus now, like your time versus my time versus what the midshipmen are currently going through, is as we know the Academy changes, it adjusts, it evolves
Mhm.
over time, and some of those things are legitimate. And I think, like you're saying, some of the soak time comes down to an absorbing time of information, comes down to pure sleep deprivation, and like external obligations on certain things. And so recently, as of this year, actually brand new this year, they've introduced what's known as the Trident period. And so they've adjusted the academic schedule. They made the morning classes earlier and the afternoon classes later. So now there's like an hour block in the lunch period, like afternoon meal, where it's designed a couple days out of the week for like academic extra instruction if they want to go. There's a couple military training days, and they will do now all forestall lectures and any kind of thing that was like what we would do after evening meal, like in the evenings. They're doing that lunch period now. So now it's like guaranteed that like after evening meal, you can go back to your room and study and do homework, right? And so like those evening obligations are now no longer a thing. They've been shifted to like the noon meal.
That's very.
Um,
They've seen like an increase in like graduating or grades or your GPA.
Well, so this will be the first year. This is really going to be like the trial year. Like this is going to be the trial year on that and how it goes. They did it the spring semester of last year, like after spring break. They tried it out as like a pure trial run, and I guess it seems like it would have went well enough that they've decided to implement it full time this year.
That's awesome
So
because you know, it does happen where, someone will graduate in the top 100 and they
Mhm.
may not be the best leader, but you have people in the bottom of the class that I think have more tend towards an IQ that can be very, very successful in the fleet. But I'm
Mhm.
actually glad that I hear that, because it kind of gives maybe someone that was like in my shoes just a little buffer, a little more time, decrease the stress. And the Annapolis is an emotional time. We are college kids. Our brain isn't fully developed yet in terms of responding with logic. There are times where we most likely will react with emotion. And I was telling the baristas today around the corner from my house that, there will, I'm going to be on a podcast. They asked what it's about. And I'm like, it's basically about when a midshipman calls home and goes, I don't want to be here anymore. And, the parent, like you said, there's no playbook for that. So you have to navigate those emotions and then navigate the game plan on
Yeah.
why we should stay, on why you should be there, and everything like that. But that's great that the academy is evolving to accommodate, their. I like that because they're setting the mids up for success. And I truly believe that if a mid goes more than halfway and capitalizes on that time and builds a relationship with their teacher and their professor, and really can get down into the nit and gritty and spend an hour in their office where it's like one on one, where, and then some midshipmen in class may not ask questions. I know I didn't ask questions because I didn't want to look dumb, in
Sure.
front of my peers. But in that, with that allocated time in EI, looking back on it, I should have capitalized on EI a lot more and build a rapport with my teachers and actually kind of gone line by line of what those learning objectives were. And it would have been like probably would have been maybe a little more successful. And it definitely would have decreased the stress a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, and so again, as we're saying this term EI, again for parents who may be listening, this term EI stands for extra instruction. Think of it as office hours, right? For your professors, like they're basically offering, again, quite literally extra instruction, one-on-one teaching in this period for you to go and get help academically if you need it. Especially with like the teacher who is teaching your course.
And I've never heard of a teacher that denies EI or
It's one of the beautiful things of the Naval Academy, dude.
right
Like
there.
the staff, more than anywhere else in the country, they will make themselves available to be present for you if you need EI. If you ask for help, you will get help,
Mhm.
right? Like that is cool.
And just not to divert, for a parent watching this out there and for future midshipman parents, if your mid calls you and they're having a breakdown on a class, on a class and a grade, and they might not make it through, you can ask the proper questions of, okay, midshipman, son, daughter, have you gone to EI? Have we checked that box? Was there, did you get not a good night of sleep before? Is there anything else going on? Some midshipmen have relationships and boyfriends and girlfriends, like, that can play a role, in your emotional stability. So, for parents to kind of go down that checklist and find the crux of it, then they can make a plan for going forward. And I know personally, my mom didn't know what EI was.
Mhm.
If you're failing a class, the first thing I'd ask, are you going to EI? No. Well, okay, maybe we should consider going to EI.
Sure. But you did go to EI and you made it. You made it to the very end. And even though they're saying you were maybe a little nervous, you made a little nervous that we'd make it to graduation day, you made it happen. And you graduated in what is known as the Comma Club. Do you
Yeah.
mind explaining this term to the audience, like what the Comma Club is?
So the comma club is when, very simply, you graduate and there's a comma in your order of merit. And then there's
That's right.
the anchor man or the anchor person that is
Yep.
the last person in the class. And they're traditionally supposed to get $1 from
From
everyone
everybody.
in the class. And the thing is with Annapolis is not like a class is 20,000 deep. The comma club is at the bottom, because I remember roughly each class is around 900 to 1,200 people. And I actually, not to divert, I had a friend that I think was trying to get the anchor man strategically. Like, I think he actually went to some professors and was like, hey, if you give me a D, I might get this.
I might get an extra
I might
$1,000.
get this.
Yeah.
We work this out. But yes, I graduated in the very bottom of the
Yep.
class of 2000.
And this is a really interesting, again, perspective for parents. I think you understand at the Naval Academy, you get a sense that like you are ranked and everything is evaluated, but that's really real, right? Like, again, when you're graduating in the Comma Club, it means your overall order of merit, is at the very bottom of the class, right? Like you're saying, again, my class, I think we graduated about 1,050 people, which means there were about 50 people who were, again, order of merit 1,000 to 1,050,
Yeah.
right? And like those folks would be a part of the Comma Club. And again, over your time at the Academy, you're being evaluated. You have, again, our overall order of merit, which is a mix between your academic order of merit and how you do academically. And then also, I think it's like your military order of merit, just like your general, what they deem as like your quote unquote aptitude or like military performance, which includes the physical side, which includes the conduct side, which includes the honor side, the interpersonal side, etc.
Does the peer evaluations play a role in that too? Like,
Oh, peer evaluation sure play a role in it,
yeah,
dude. Yeah, certainly
like,
play a role. It goes into your aptitude grade. It goes into your aptitude grade. Yeah.
and yeah, not to go kind of too off the beaten path, but that, those evaluations can break a person down as well too.
Oh yeah, they can. We're actually going to do a full episode on the peer evaluations because those can get brutal.
Yeah, those can get
Those can get
gnarly.
brutal.
You don't know who they come from.
Anonymous.
The youngster class can rank you one, but the senior class can rank you last. It's a very big emotional jerk. But yeah.
Yeah. And so that's what the Comma Club is. And our good friend Stefan here was a member of the Comma Club, but so much as a part of your foundation now, again, it was the name of your LLC that you've used to create this company that you're currently running. And so what I want to talk about and shift this conversation to on the second half a little bit, I want you to tell your story a little bit. You mentioned that you had to deal with, a couple of layoffs, a couple of different situations, this transition in your work world until you found what you're doing now. Can you talk about how this experience at the Naval Academy, this struggle, this being a part of the Comma Club, put you in a position to be ready to handle some of these situations, and just talk about your journey?
Yeah. So, the Naval Academy is always kind of been described as a fire hose, and there is one thing I've learned is that you find out you learn things and you can handle things better later in life, so after the fact. So at Annapolis, you don't think you're learning anything, but subconsciously, you are learning how to handle pressure and deal with your peers. It is a leadership laboratory where you will work on your public speaking. You will work on your presence in a room. You will work with outside entities, foreign entities. You will be going, you will be going on summer training where you might, where you're a little pack of mids, you might be in charge. And, there are some people in charge that are better than others. And so having those pressures kind of subconsciously be implemented in me and exposed to has definitely helped me kind of later in life and in the situations I've been in. And I have realized when you go to Annapolis, you don't just kind of accept the standard there, but for me personally, it's a standard for the rest of your life. You want to represent that school. It's the taxpayers' money. And I'm not saying you have to be like this big GI Joe type of person, but I realize in myself that you want it to make sense when you walk into a room. You want to have that humbleness and that modest approach. And he went to Annapolis. Okay, that makes sense. I'm glad my tax dollars went to that. And I kind of realized that later in time. And, I learned about, so the pressures I learned there when I became an ocean lifeguard for the city of San Diego and, going out on critical rescues, I was able to stay calm, stay focused, that kind of tribulations and challenges I had from 18 to 22 at Annapolis helped those situations very well. In the fleet also, I think I worked on a lot of kind of I was a good speaker, and Annapolis honed in on those. And I think I did well during my sea and anchor briefs when I was a first lieutenant. And then if you fast forward to when I was in cloud beds in my entry level sales position, I was able to become a sales leadership position. And I was able to coach the market managers underneath me very well, with clear communication, clear next steps and everything like that. And then also my company, realizing, it's kind of weird, I first initially came up with my idea for this fast release strap back in spring of 2020. But I got real motivated, but COVID happened, and that's kind of like a whole nother story. So then my strap went into a shoebox for a year, and then, or for 4 years, and then I get laid off, and I surface this idea, and I create the Comma Club LLC as a little ode to, myself and to possibly others, saying like, okay, just because I graduated in the Comma Club doesn't mean I can't maybe do something cool, create a niche, something that doesn't exist, something that's validation, something that has a cool story behind it. And then I realized, it's like, wow, I learned about leadership at Annapolis. I learned I can do more than I can handle. I learned, how to listen more than lead. I learned how to listen to the subject matter experts around me. And I learned to kind of have that balance of a leader. Like, when I worked with my product designer for my strap, Mike was the subject matter expert. And, him and I worked together on this. And I wouldn't say I led him, but I had a leadership presence where I listened to him. And, there was plenty of times where he put me in my place in a way. And he said, no, we're not doing it that way. We're doing it this way. And, Annapolis has taught me that as well, to listen to the subject matter experts around you, whether it be in a 4-stall lecture or your company officer, even a person that you interact with every day, allowed me to learn in this environment and apply it to what I'm doing now.
Yeah. And where are you at today with the progress and everything? Give us a full rundown of where you're at with the straps. And if people want to learn more about the straps, where should they go? Give us a rundown of where you're currently at and a little bit about what you're building.
So basically, just kind of a little background story. When I was a lifeguard for the city of San Diego, I didn't know it at the time, but our rescue boards, which is our vital tool to get out to the ocean, you could have 6 drowning victims hanging on to this thing. They were on our Tacomas and Tundras, and they were held down by traditional market surf straps. And they were very hard to get off, and no strap was configured the same way. If you worked in Ocean Beach, the board might have been strapped down differently than if you worked in La Jolla. Didn't really think of it at the time. 2020 comes around. I'm living in Ocean Beach. I'm working for that company, that software company, and I'm looking at my old sergeant's truck. It's called One Sam. And I'm looking, and I'm just like a normal entrepreneur story. I'm just looking at this truck and the straps hanging on. You got this beautiful truck, $1,000 rescue board, and you have these awful non-aesthetic, working straps that are on this board. I'm like, and I just said to myself, like, there has to be something better than this.
This could be better.
And so then I hit it, and then and then I hit it hard. I came up, I was reorganizing information. I looked at straps, bungees, pulls, and everything like that. What can come off and on the same time every time. There's not multiple ways to configure it. And then I also realized, straps in the regular world are kind of cumbersome. They could just be a cam buckle with 20 foot of slack. And then here you go, user, figure it out. And I just wanted something a little more aesthetically pleasing, tactical for the lifeguard side. And even though it was dedicated for the lifeguards, that's kind of the homey entrepreneurial story. It's a general utility strap. It can be used by multiple markets in multiple, fashions and truck beds and everything like that. So if we fast forward now, the doing business name is Rissant Straps. And for those of anyone out there that wants to start a company, you can make an LLC name. But if you don't want that to be your forward-facing name in the market, you could do a doing business as. For me, I didn't want to have LLC behind, my company name. So I made the name Rissant Straps. Rissant is German for fast, quick, speedy, efficient. Kind of goes along with the whole strap theme, for the actual product. We're on Instagram. Rissant Straps is the handle. RissantStraps.com is the website. We are on Amazon under Amazon Prime. So we fall under FBA. I have units at fulfillment centers right now. And then, I really, did my prior research, and I realized that this wasn't just an issue for the San Diego lifeguards. It was worldwide. Everyone is using some sort of bungee that can snap and hit you in the face or something like that. And there was no dedicated rescue strap. And that's how I kind of pitch it. It's not just a strap, it's a rescue board or rescue equipment accessory. So right now, currently, we're in 30 agencies plus across the United States. A majority of them, being in Southern California. I have city of San Diego, city of Coronado, Imperial Beach, Cal State Parks, San Diego Coast Districts were located on their vehicles. We're in Oregon, Florida, Alabama has beaches, the little Gulf shores. And, we're through the Carolinas and up in the Northeast in terms of New Hampshire and recently Nauset Beach Lifeguards in Orleans, Massachusetts. We are officially now in New Zealand on some of their lifeguard vehicles. We're being evaluated by United Kingdom, the Royal National Lifeboat Institution, United Kingdom, lifeguards, Ireland, and then I have a couple straps floating around in Australia for testing. I'm working with Polaris right now. Polaris is testing some straps on their vehicles to possibly be a part of their accessory line. It'd be cool to be on their vehicles, both in their off-road and government defense. And it was great to even get past, that kind of the first step, because you have to think a lot of accessory departments come to Polaris. A lot of strap companies come to Polaris trying to be a part of their accessory line, and they kind of get denied. Like, I remember when I talked to Polaris, a company came to Polaris was like, yeah, this would be great on your vehicles, but you can't go over 35 miles an hour. And Polaris is like, well, our vehicles go up 90 miles an hour. So it was a good part of validation for me. And remember, validation is a good thing, depending on how you use it and accept it. And it was great to be in those steps. And then Granger submitted my capability statement to Granger, one of the biggest construction supply companies in the world. And I passed their kind of initial review. And at the end of this quarter, we'll be headed to the contractual aspect to actually becoming a supplier for Granger.
Congratulations.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah, and that's kind of the high level.
Yeah.
When you.
No, I mean, you've created something incredible, right? Like, and this is it's not just a prototype. Like, you're out here distributing internationally now at this point, again with the New Zealand contract and everything, and it's just incredible, right? It's incredible to watch and see. And again, I wholeheartedly believe it's the pitch I give when people are considering a service academy education is that it's going to provide the foundation of this ultimate grit and this ultimate message to Garcia. And despite getting beaten down and being in the stressful and anxious environment, it's allowed you and provided you the foundation now, looking back in retrospect, to go and take these adversities you've experienced as an adult and build something great, right? And continue moving forward in that pathway. And so just a big congratulations to you. We're going to get ready to wrap this up, but I want to turn it back to you and give you one last opportunity to talk, to anyone out there who, again, if it's a parent with a struggling midshipman or the midshipman who's struggling themselves or anything else, of, one last thing about your experience, the lessons that you've learned, what you've learned in your entrepreneurial journey and where you've arrived now, and just what perspective would you give to someone who may be struggling and who may end up in that comma club?
I think to stay calm, stay poised, stay in the present. Mm-hmm. I've done a really good job on doing a lot of inner work and staying in the present. Just because you fail a class, don't project that situation to the future. There will be mids that will fail class from now to the end of time. Kind of realize what you did wrong. Have those failures be your greatest teachers. Don't try the same thing twice. Reevaluate and go and move forward with new perspective and utilize on maybe why you failed that class and reverse it. And if you do call home, please call home. Your parents, should be your biggest supporter, but meet your parents halfway and coming up with a game plan to keep emotions low and respond with logic and not react with emotion. And just because you graduate in the bottom of your class, you still are, special. You still are a part of this elite group that will graduate from the United States Naval Academy. No one really asked me my order of merit or grades moving forward. I just talked to some potential investors last week that may invest in the company, and that's TBD so far. But if I was told as a midshipman that you're going to create a product that's very niche, that has a validation, and you might have investors, you're going to be working with companies that are worth a lot of money, I would have been like, yeah, right. I'm not worthy. I'm not worthy. From the first midshipman that graduates in the beginning of your class and the last, you are worthy of being there. You're supposed to be there. And you just, some of us were just kind of born to be fighters. They're for the mids out there, the parents, your kid might just not have, the natural talent to just look at a textbook 5 minutes before the class and ace the exam. You may not have that natural raw intelligence, and that's fine. And some of us were born to fight. And the Annapolis, when you get to my stage or when you get laid off, that network is a golden ticket. And I've always seen you post on your various channels that it is a very good thing to have in your back pocket. And I wouldn't be where I am today if I wasn't an Annapolis grad and I didn't rely on my friends and the network that it provides. I was able to get in touch with someone through the Commit Foundation to put me in touch with someone. Was an Annapolis grad, is a veteran entrepreneur, but he's the one that resurfaced the idea of moving forward with the straps. And that was through Annapolis. So even though it was a grinder and I graduated low in the class, it still got me to where I am today.
Heck yeah. Well, Stefan, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today and share your story. Again, especially around this exam week period where people may kind of be feeling the stress and struggle of things not going great. So I appreciate you doing that. We'll put links for anyone who's interested and maybe like, hey, this is actually related to my world and I may know someone who may be interested in these straps or investing in these straps, etc. We'll put a link in the show notes to all of Stefan's stuff and resources so you can take a look at that as well. You also feel free to shoot me a message at any time and I'll get you in touch with him.
Open door policy. Please feel free to reach out. Anyone can reach out. Parent, midshipman, anyone. I have an open door policy. I will always have an ear and time for mids and parents and Naval Academy graduates in general.
Heck yeah. Well, thank you, man. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you so much. And for everyone listening, again, feel free to reach out if you ever have any questions. Otherwise, I appreciate you listening and I hope you have a good day.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Academy Insider Podcast. I really hope you liked it, enjoyed it, and learned something during this time. If you did, please feel free to like and subscribe or leave a comment about the episode. We really appreciate to hear your feedback about everything and continue to make Academy Insider an amazing service that guides, serves, and supports midshipmen, future midshipmen, and their families. Thank you.